Back in 2003, 71% of households in England were homeowners. Fast forward to now, and only 64% own their own home. And while we're all too familiar with London's housing crisis, the problem is no longer confined to the capital. Levels have dramatically dropped in the South and West Yorkshire, the West Midlands and in Greater Manchester, which has seen the sharpest fall of any major city. 72% of households were homeowners in 2003, but last year only 58% of families owned their own home. So what's behind this? It can mainly be explained by house prices soaring during times of weaker wage growth. There's also been a lower supply of new housing. According to the latest official figures, the average house price in the UK stood at £211,230 in May. Annual house price growth is running at a rate of almost 14%. In contrast, annual salary growth has run at levels of 2% or below since the financial crisis. The average salary in the UK stands at £27,600. Let's talk about the issues around this with Alex Wild, Research Director at the TaxPayers Alliance, which campaigns for a lower tax economy. Good afternoon to you. We've identified some of the reasons behind this. What are some of the solutions?
Well, I've been watching quite a few of the interviews you've been having about this report, and it seems like everyone seems to be obsessed with all of these schemes and all of this messing around, frankly. The biggest problem that we've got in the country when it comes to housing is planning and the regulation of land use, because we have this thing called the Green Belt, which has been around since the 50s, and we have very, very stringent restrictions on building up in city centres and building out. And as the population increases, demand for housing increases. The supply of housing is just so inelastic, it can't increase, so prices just go up and up and up, and that is the biggest problem we have. We need to relax restrictions on planning, and we need to start thinking about where we are going to build these houses, because otherwise house prices are going to go up, home ownership is going to keep falling, and rents are also going to keep going up.
But the Green Belt exists for a reason. We simply can't build on every available plot of land, can we, surely?
Well, there's a little misunderstanding here. The Green Belt isn't a environmental designation. There are large swathes of the Green Belt which are things like disused car parks and open quarries. And actually, in the last 40 years, the Green Belt has expanded by more than 127%. So no one's saying that we should go and concrete over areas of outstanding natural beauty, etc. But we need to reassess this. Like I say, it's not an environmental designation. It's there to prevent urban sprawl. And whilst that may be a legitimate goal, it's there are ways in which we do this. We have a very blunt instrument here, and it's government policy to deliberately restrict the supply of housing and increase prices. And until we do something about this, we're going to keep having these problems.
Staying with the Green Belt, what percent do you think needs to be clawed back? And is this something that you think the government would be willing to look at?
Well, eventually a government is going to have to look at this, because house prices are going to increase, home ownership is going to fall, and eventually people are going to get annoyed about it. But you're probably talking about a few percent here and there, especially around London. I say, going back to the idea that this is some kind of environmental good, if you look at areas like Cambridge, 75% of the Green Belt there is in intensive arable farming land. That's actually very bad for the environment, and around 1/3 of it in London. So if we look at maybe starting to develop areas around railway stations and various commuter links, we can start addressing this problem, but it's going to be a long, hard slog, because we've had 50 or 60 years of terrible housing and planning policy, which we need to start setting into reverse.
Reclaiming some of the Green Belt, that's one specific area that could be paid attention to. What other areas do you think the government needs to look at to address this problem of people simply not being able to get onto the housing ladder at all?
Well, the big problem with what the government tends to do is they all just tend to look at the demand side, and we have these ridiculous subsidies like Help to Buy, which fundamentally fail to address the underlying causes, which is the restriction of land available for housing. And then when you get into cities, things like building restrictions, restriction on the heights of buildings. I mean, if you look at a city like London compared to a city like New York, London's not very densely populated. We've got very large green spaces within London, and we don't really have many tower blocks. Even if you look at places like the City of London, there aren't many towers, because there's a rule that you have to be able to see St Paul's Cathedral through a gap in a hedge in Richmond Park. This is completely absurd. So this is what we need to do. We need to build up and we need to build out.
And are we unnecessarily obsessed with owning our own homes? There are very many other places in the world where people rent for their entire lives.
Well, I think it just has to be a personal choice. I mean, some people might prefer to rent and, people use houses as pensions, which I don't think is a particularly good thing. You really are putting all of your eggs into one basket there. But it's a personal choice, really, or it should be anyway. So I wouldn't necessarily say that lots of people need to own houses, but it's not just about home ownership. Like, if house prices are going up, rents are also going up. So it's just, they're two sides of the same problem.
And what about attention to schemes like Help to Buy? Do you think that's an area that needs to be addressed?
Well, I think Help to Buy should just be ended immediately. It's just going to increase prices because you're just increasing demand. And actually what you tend to be doing, you tend to be helping relatively well-off people who are quite close to home ownership, who are, incidentally probably swing voters, which may have come into it depending on how cynical you are. But like I say, these are the wrong solutions. They've completely misdiagnosed the problem here. The problem is that not enough houses are being built, and that is because of planning and land use restrictions.
Okay, Alex Wild, Research Director at the Taxpayers Alliance. Good to speak to you. Thank you.